see if I can get this video to come on. Aha, we're here. So thank you very much, Megan, for arranging this, and thank you to all the people on various campuses that are helping out, and so on, Dennis and Will and Cassie. And thank you for everyone who's turned up live. Actually, that's a remarkable number of people, number one, to sign up, and number two, to actually turn up, because you know, I run a number of webinars. I know a lot of people who do, and it's rare to have you know, more than 25% of people turn up to something. And even when they're paying, you know, they don't always necessarily turn up. So thank you for coming up. I want to give you as much as I can in this time that's helpful about tapping. So I presume, Megan, you've just, I'm just going for it. Is that right? You've just, can you just come on for 30 seconds or 10 seconds and just let me know? Otherwise, I'll just.
Yep, just go for it. So if you, I'm going to be here. So if you want to stop at any stage and say we will take questions, you've got access to the Q&A box, but I don't want to overwhelm you with boxes and stuff that you need to look at.
Yep.
And I think an hour and a half we don't need a break, but if you know, if you feel you need a break at some stage, let us know. I think we should be fine to go straight through.
No, barring natural disasters, we should be fine. The only thing is, if you can change the view around so that they can, especially, I will be, by the way, people calling for someone to volunteer because I want to demonstrate some tapping with someone. So if you have a common garden variety here, here we go, full screen. So if you have a common garden variety issue or challenge or problem, then we'll be looking for someone to volunteer, and we'll do some work with you using the tapping. Now, what I want to do is I want to start off and share my screen, because I do actually have some slides to go through, and I want to go through these as quickly as possible because I want to make this practical. But sometimes the only way to get all the information there is to put it onto a few slides. So let's just move very quickly through these. The challenge for everyone is to manage your emotions. And you know, I say to people, what's the biggest problem anything that can really cause you? And when it really comes down to it, the biggest problem anything can really cause you is how it makes you feel. So here's my good friend, Dr. David Lake. He's an intergalactic megastar. He and I spent about 20 years traveling around the world together teaching tapping after he overcame his lifelong public speaking phobia using tapping when we went to see Gary Craig back in February 1998. And this is a down moment. He never looks like this, but since he did that day, I caught him looking like that, and I've shown this all around the world now. So in that state, you're going to be challenged with whatever you have to deal with. And I spent my whole life trying to work out how to manage my own emotions, how to help other people to manage their emotions. And I've never found anything do what tapping can do. When you want to change how you feel, then generally you're going to do one of a number of different things. You know, some people will reach for their favorite poison, but essentially what we need to do is we need to change something on, you know, one or more levels of these four. One is mind, is what and how you think. And so a lot of you are very familiar with cognitive approaches. Then there's body and physiology, how you use your body, the condition of your physiology, and so on. There's the behaviors, the things that you do, the skills that you've learned. And now this new area called energy psychology, which I have had the good fortune of being involved with since late 1997. And it still astounds me what you can do with some of these techniques. So of course I have a model for this. Once you put something into a diagram, you then have a model. So this is my model, you know, we could go through various mind-based approaches, various body-based approaches. A lot more somatic approaches are getting airway now, because people are realizing that we have a body. You know, when I first started studying psychology, it was all about the mind, and it was about behavior and stuff like that. But, you know, CBT has ruled for many years, and certainly it has some great strengths, but it doesn't do everything. And so, you know, due to the limitations of some of the approaches that have been around for many years, people have been looking at other stuff. And so there's a lot of body-based approaches. Now, technically, tapping is a body-based approach. but it's also part of what's been called energy psychology. So let me just quickly run through where this came from and how we got here. Some of you may not know that tapping is actually about stimulating acupressure points or acupuncture points on the body. They're the same points that were used in traditional Chinese medicine, where we got acupuncture and acupressure. And a clinical psychologist in the US named Roger Callahan made a great discovery with a client who had a severe water phobia. And he had learned this system, and he'd been trying everything with this lady for about 18 months to 2 years to help her with her water phobia, and basically got nowhere. You know, he was using cognitive therapy, he was using hypnosis, he was using systematic desensitization, you know, setting up a hierarchy of steps and trying to get her to relax. He was using visualization, you know, he was using breathing techniques, etc., and nothing was really helping. And then one day she, you know, every time she thought about water, she would have this horrible feeling in her stomach. And so Callahan thinks, well, according to this system, there's a point under the eye that's part of what they call the, you know, in traditional Chinese medicine, they call the stomach meridian, or the energy line that flows through that area, according to that theory. And he just says, just tap under your eye there. And she taps under her eye for just a couple of minutes, and she says, it's gone. And he says, what do you mean? She says, well, the feeling in my stomach is completely gone. So he says, okay, let's go test it. She's so excited that she runs towards the pool, and apparently got really worried and said, Mary, stop, you know, what are you doing? And she said, it's okay, Dr. Callahan, I know I can't swim. I just want to test this. And she went down to the pool and she splashed water on her face, and her lifelong phobia never came back and has never come back. You know, this is 50 odd years ago now. And anyway, so he developed an approach he called thought field therapy. Unfortunately, because of the way he presented that and some of the claims he made, it's led to a lot of controversy in the field. Gary Craig came along, who's a Harvard engineer who studied with Callahan, and he wanted to come up with a, you know, by this time, Callahan had come up with a, you know, discovered a number of different sequences of stimulating these points by tapping on them, and put them into this program he called thought field therapy. And Gary wanted to come up with a simpler, complete overhaul approach, where he thought, well, if there's, you know, there's 12 main lines, what if we stimulate all the points on all these different energy lines and so on? And he was able to come up with what he calls emotional freedom techniques. Now, that is the most popular worldwide. When people talk about tapping or acupoint stimulation, EFT, emotional freedom techniques, is the #1 most popular in the field. Now, my good friend that I showed you the picture of, and I have developed a simpler version of this. We call it Simple Energy Techniques. And we've had the good fortune to be able to travel around the world teaching that to people. You know, I was just up in Toronto. I'll be heading to New Zealand. I'll be coming over to Sydney, up in Darwin actually shortly, and later in the year over in Europe and the UK. So we've been able to develop our own approach. I'm going to show you some of that tonight. And I've also recently discovered this approach I call intention tapping. I'm just starting to realize how long this is going to take to go through this, but let me just say, you know, I never would have looked at tapping if I had not been having a conversation one day with a guy named Michael Tunnicliffe, who's a clinical psychologist. He did a lot of work in trauma. He went around the country teaching, setting up peer support programs in corporations to deal with traumatic incidents. And you know, we were just chatting at a cafe one day, and he says, what do you do with people's fears and phobias? And I talked about a couple of techniques I used, and he said, well, you know, you could use this new tapping technique. And I'm like, what? Anyway, he had been to a conference in the US. He'd come back with these videotapes that Gary Craig had just put together, showing his approach, EFT. And he said, I'll loan you the tapes if you want. So these are videotapes, you know, it's incredible the difference in technology now. Anyway, so I took them home and I looked at them. And at the time I was running groups with Vietnam vets. And so you know, one of these videos was entirely devoted to 6 days that Gary had spent in the Veterans Administration Hospital in LA, working with war veterans and helping them get over their trauma and get over their massive anxiety and stress and so on, and getting over phobias and stuff, you know, like, and you could see the results. So I was fascinated and I wanted to try it out. So of course I grabbed hold of my wife and said, would you like to try this new thing? And, you know, we just sat down. You know, I still had the manual in front of me. I was trying to work out where to get her to tap on these points. And, you know, in EFT, you say these things to focus you on the problem, and you focus in and you tap on these points while you're focusing on the problem. And she had a needle fear. And she was going to be, this was just before our twins were born. They're now 20. And she had to go in for this blood test. So she had a real fear about that. And, you know, when she thought about it, she could lose her breath. So I just said, well, you know, just tap on these points and, you know, focus in on that fear. And she clearly relaxed in like minutes. And I was fascinated. I was like, wow, you know, let's, you know, and it went like on a SUDS, you know, subjective units of distress, 5 out of 10 to start with. It was down to a 2 in like 2 minutes. And I said, well, let's get it down to a 0. And she said, you're not going to get me to do that silly looking thing again. So I'm like, okay. Next day, she goes and has the blood test. And she is, honestly, she is completely, she's completely able to, she's like, I didn't have any fear at all. I was able to watch them put the needle in. She's, I've never been able to do that before. And no more needle fear. She's never had a problem with needles ever since that day. So I was fascinated, and I went through these videotapes relentlessly, and I learned the points. And then a few days later, I had a client with trauma who was this lady. I was working with a 16-year-old boy, and he had been really threatening to kill his mother. And she came into my office shaking. She was shaking like a leaf, and I said, what happened? And she said, a couple of nights before, he had cut a cake with a cake knife and wiped the blade off on her arm and threatened to stab her with this. And she hadn't been able to sleep. She'd been shaking ever since. And she was, honestly, she just looked like she was white as a ghost, really petrified. So I just thought, well, here's an opportunity to try this out. So I said to her, look, you know, and I sent the boy out. You know, at the time I was doing therapy at my home. I had a home office. So I sent him out. He was in my living room. I thought, oh my God, I hope he's not doing anything, you know, to destroy stuff out there. And I just worked with her, and I said, look, just learned this thing. Would you like to give it a go? And if it doesn't work, we can try some conventional techniques. And she's like, I'll try anything. So I had her tapping on these points, and then she tapped on this point on the side of the index finger, and it was like, whew, it was like the problem left the room in an instant. And she says, boy, that one worked, didn't it? And I said, yeah, it looked like it did. I said, how are you feeling? She says, I feel really good. I said, well, how do you feel about what happened the other night? She says, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to bother me as much. I said, it doesn't bother you as much? You were shaking like a leaf. She says, yeah, I know. She says, but it just doesn't seem to bother me right now. And she spent like 5 minutes trying to get her problem back, and she couldn't find it. I've seen this hundreds of times now, and it's just as good to see it, but there's nothing like the first time. And anyone who knows tapping, I'm sure there's a lot of people here who know about tapping now. When I first, you know, come back to Australia, we started teaching this to people. Nobody knew anything about it. But now in a group like this, normally about 30% of people know about it. By the way, while I'm speaking, it's going to be on SBS in a couple of weeks' time on myth or medicine, because a couple of people I know actually have had the opportunity to do some tapping on that program. So you can watch it on there. So it's getting out there in all kinds of ways. Anyway, we did a bit more tapping on some other things that she was worried about. She went home, and when she came back with him the next week, she was a different person. She didn't have any more fear. She had stood up to him. She had said, you're not going to do this to me anymore. And she said, if we're going to live together, we're going to have to learn to respect each other. And she apologized to him. It's a beautiful balance that she had, where she could see his side and she could see her side. And he pulled his finger out and he started acting like a normal person, got himself a job. And as far as I know, he's still a fine, upstanding member of the community. So we wanted to learn more. We went over and studied with Gary in San Francisco in February 1998. As I mentioned, my good friend, Dr. David Lack, here he is. These are some of the stills from the video. where he was up on stage being treated by Gary using EFT for his lifelong public speaking phobia. And, you know, when he went out there, he had this, you know, dry throat, he had the heart rate going, you know, he couldn't really speak, and, you know, he was just really clumsy. And Gary was basically just having him do the tapping on these points, focusing in on different issues and problems that he had. And after about 20 minutes or so, he was able to stand up and start talking to the group. And there was about 75 people from all over the world in the room. And he started to get a little bit of confidence, and he started to look like himself. And it was just fascinating to me to see. And it was a fantastic thing. And the whole treatment took 38 minutes. And we came back to Australia. And I was already training, you know, I was running workshops for therapists, psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists in provocative therapy that we had both learned. And I said, why don't you join me and we'll teach this tapping? And he's like, well, why would I? I said, well, it'd be a good test. And if you want to, you know, you can share what you've learned about this, and you can also share, you know, what you know about, because he's an expert in trauma. And he's an expert in trauma and relationships, and he says it's almost the same thing sometimes. And so he agreed. And on the plane on the way, we ran this workshop in Melbourne. I'm from Perth, he's from Sydney. And when he was flying on the plane to Melbourne, he said he was just had a little bit of a vague fear of the unknown. So he was tapping on these acupressure points while he was on the plane. And when the plane landed, the lady sitting next to him put her hand on his arm and said, it's okay, we're there now. But I'll never forget this. You know, he stood up in front of about 35, 40 professional people in Melbourne. He introduces himself and he turns around to me and he says, I can't believe it. I don't feel any of it. Now, this is a difference between tapping and a lot of other techniques. You know, if you learn to control your thoughts or to manage your thoughts, you often will still have some anxiety. If you do it, but you can manage it. If you do exposure therapy and you do lots and lots and lots, you know, you feel the fear and do it anyway, then generally over time you have less anxiety, but you still often have some. And some people do it hundreds of times and they still have anxiety. You didn't have any anxiety whatsoever. And that was the difference. And that was the beginning of us spending, you know, 20 odd years traveling around the world. And this is actually him in Paris, actually, in front of about 60 people. My son was with us at the time, took this photo. And that was what it was like. He just didn't have any fear anymore. The problem had gone away. So, yeah, it's just been a great, great thing for him. It was a great, great thing for me. You know, I tell people tapping is one of the only things I've learned in all my study of psychology that works at home. I use it, my wife uses it, we've used it with all of our kids. I've shared it with my in-laws, outlaws, you know, friends, clients, you name it. And the results have been quite remarkable. Back at that time, I decided to do some research. Through Curtin University, we advertised for people to, so this is me with a spider in front of my face. Some of the people who came for our research, when they opened that page of the paper, they had to throw the paper on the floor because it was just, they just couldn't even see a photo of a spider without having their phobia just rear its ugly head. And we did the first randomized controlled trial of EFT treatment for phobias. We gave people a single 30-minute treatment. We had a comparison treatment, which was a deep breathing treatment. We wanted to, we actually paralleled the treatments because we wanted to show that, you know, it wasn't just a distraction to do this tapping. So arguably that both groups had the same amount of distraction. And the results were profound in many, many ways, and particularly profound on how you know, people could approach the thing that they feared. You know, we had people who wouldn't even go in the room if there was a spider in there, who could go right up to the spider or the mouse or the cockroach or whatever it was that, you know, these are all small animals that people had phobias of. And on average, 24.3 years or something that people had their phobia. So a lot of them, it's like I've had this my whole life, and they were able to get over it. And every single one of them got better, and a lot of them got completely over their phobia with a single 30-minute treatment. So we had that research published, and since that time, there has been a massive amount of research. So let me just quickly run through this, and then once I've gone through some of the research evidence to settle down those of you who need to know this part of it, then we can show you how to use the technique. The conscious judging mind of anyone who's studied psychology or anybody who's studied science has trouble accepting something that's outside the paradigm, and tapping is right outside the traditional paradigm of helping and healing and therapy. But there has been a massive amount of research that's been done, and most of it has been done in the last 5 to 10 years. So if you see someone saying there's no evidence on tapping, they're probably talking about 20 years ago, you know, before I did my study, or even around that time, that was the only randomized controlled trial that we had. But now we have a massive number of studies that have been done. So just to go through, for those of you who don't know so much about evidence, this is a hierarchy that you go through to prove something. You know, the lowest level of evidence is anecdotal. Someone says, oh, my mother tried, you know, coconut oil and got over her Alzheimer's, you know, so you need to use coconut oil or give coconut oil to your mother who has Alzheimer's and she'll be cured. You know, well, not very much. Even if you have 100 people saying that, that's not really convincing, because there's a whole lot of factors that could be operating other than the coconut oil. Then there's systematic observation, where you actually, you know, you observe things more systematically. Then there's case studies where you work with an individual and you use scientific method and you actually show that there's a result. Then there's group studies where you do before and after, and you go, okay, well, before they were really anxious, then we did the treatment, and after they weren't anxious. The only problem is you didn't compare it with a bunch of other people, because they might have, you know, there might have been other factors that made them not have anxiety. So then you do a randomized controlled trial where you have groups randomly allocated, and you know, you have enough people so that there's no major differences between the groups before the treatment, and then you track the results, and preferably you also have follow-up. And then if you have a lot of studies that have been done, then you do a thing called a meta-analysis, where you do where you look at all the studies that have been done in a particular area that meet a certain criteria, and you do and you check out using a statistical analysis the size, whether there's an effect, a real effect, and whether there's a significant effect. All right, so tapping has had a bunch of this stuff done. Back in 2012, David Feinstein did a review of the research to that time, and at that time there'd been 51 peer-reviewed papers published on acupoint tapping. A couple of different approaches, mainly EFT, but some studies on TFT, thought field therapy. 18 of those at that time were randomized controlled trials, and there were enough studies that had independent replication by different researchers to show that tapping had met the American Psychological Association's evidence-based criteria, the Division 12 criteria, for a number of conditions, including phobias, test anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and public speaking anxiety. Now, this is also significant because that particular review was published in the American Psychological Association's own journal, the Review of General Psychology, so a highly prestigious journal. He recently did another review, which was published in the journal Explore, and you can access this online. So if you can see that, that link there, you can go online and you can read that. But I think what we'll do through Megan, I will send this out after the program so that you will be able to just click on the link and go straight to it. So in his most recent review, now there's been over 100 peer-reviewed outcome studies. 51 of them are randomized controlled trials, and the body of evidence is really growing to show that acupoint-based, energy psychology protocols that involve stimulating acupoints, particularly through tapping on them, are very rapid and effective in treating anxiety, depression, PTSD, and a number of other conditions. There have been 4 meta-analyses. Now, just so you know, less than 10% of what we use and study in psychology has had this much research done on it. This is just a massive amount of research that's been done. And in fact, there's over 200 researchers across, oh my gosh, I can't even remember the number of countries. Let me just see if I have it here. 12 different countries, over 200 different investigators. And then apart from, the randomized control trials, there have been these meta-analyses which have looked at the effect sizes for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. There's enough studies being done in each area to have enough high-quality studies to be able to look at the effect. And when you do this, they come up with a measure of the effect size where something around 0.2 is a small effect, around 0.5 is a moderate effect, and 0.8 or higher is considered a large effect. And as you can see, all of the effect sizes for these meta-analyses have come out as very large effects for tapping in all this research. Now let me just see if I can go to, I want to skip the next one and go to another slide. Okay, so the other thing is that the next level is to compare a treatment to other treatments. And there have now been 10 studies that have compared tapping with, energy psychology is another word for tapping, even though energy psychology as a term embraces other techniques. All these studies have actually been done on tapping, and they've compared tapping with another evidence-based comparison condition. And there have been 8 of those studies that have compared tapping with CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. And in each case, the outcomes have been at least equivalent to the outcomes of CBT. And some cases and some measures have actually exceeded the results of CBT, particularly in speed. So for example, in post-traumatic stress disorder, the great thing about tapping is that results tend to happen in less sessions. And so this is actually one of the great things about tapping. It's also less stressful for people when they do this. Now, just in terms of recent research, there have been a couple of randomized controlled trials using biological or genetic outcome measures. Peter Stapleton up at Bond University in Queensland has done an fMRI study on EFT for food cravings. Once again, the details of that study are on this page, but what I will do is I will send this out because there's probably not going to be enough time for all of you to be able to copy the details of that down. Of course, the DOI is what you want if you want to access it online. Just copy down the DOI down the bottom. And so what Peter and the researchers up there have done is they've been able to get an fMRI machine, and then they've actually done had people with food cravings. They've been able to identify where their brain lights up with those food cravings, and then they've been able to show that after the EFT treatment, it changes. So here are some examples, and again, you can access this online. You can go and have a look at these images online, and you can see what's happened after 4 weeks of EFT. You can see that the activity in those areas has completely ceased. And that's the thing that happens with food cravings. By the way, we've actually done through Curtin University, we've done a replication of one of Peter Stapleton's studies on food cravings, and we just haven't got that published just yet. We're still working on getting that published. And what we found was that we did a comparison of the tapping. We used EFT and we used SET, and we had a CBT group, and we had a no treatment control group. And what we found was that although the results were identical in terms of the changes over the 4 group sessions that we ran, the results of SET, EFT, and CBT treatment were identical. When we asked people about their cravings, the people in the CBT group said that they still had the cravings, but they could manage them now, whereas the people who had done the tapping treatment said they didn't actually have the craving. And that's the big difference. You know, the challenge is, yeah, you can, you know, if you've got the right cognitive approach, you can manage that. But when you get under the weather, that gets a little bit harder. So if you don't have the craving coming up at all, then you don't have anything that you have to try and manage. There's a little bit more, but I'm going to stop here and just come back, and maybe we can get a few questions. I know, Megan, you've probably been looking at questions that have been coming through, and what we can do is maybe have a look at some of the questions so far, and then what I'll do is I'll actually go through the tapping techniques. I'll talk about how EFT works, what is involved in that, and how our version, our simplified tapping approach, simple energy techniques, how that works, and how to use that, and we'll do a demonstration. So I see there's lots of things in the Q&A, but I know, Megan, you were looking at compiling the stuff. So I don't know if you want to send me a quick chat message about what one you want me to answer, or whether I'll just start going through.
I'll jump on. So some of the questions I can see, because I've done a lot of workshops with Steve, so I know that you're going to get to what are the points, how long does it last, how long do you have to tap on each point. So I know you're going to get to that. Yes. A great question, which is the most popular question, can it be used on children?
Oh yeah, man. This is, we've used tap. I've got 3 kids, and my oldest is now 25, and I have 2 20-year-olds. I have a boy with Down syndrome, and he has a twin sister. We argued, jokingly said that she has up syndrome. It's just very different, and it's great and wonderful. But we were able to use tapping with all of our kids. And the great thing with kids is that they don't have as much stuff as adults to go through. So sometimes you can do tapping with them. It takes like 30 seconds for them to shift how they're feeling, and the problem is actually gone. But it was such a wonderful thing to be able to use it on their nighttime fears, and it was just, it was just a lovely thing. Often, they would either come into our room or they would be screaming, and I would go into them. But I can remember many times that, Olivia, our daughter, coming in as like, I'm scared. And so Mum would say, go and see Dad. He can, can do some tapping with you. So I'd be in the dark. I'd be kind of just gently tapping on these points for her and just talking about what the problem is. Are you scared? And she's, yes. And, what are you worried about? And it was robbers, robbers was always the thing. It wasn't monsters, it was robbers. And generally that process would take about 3 to 5 minutes. And then I would say, do you feel okay now? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, you ready to go back to bed? Like, yes. And she would take herself back to bed. And oh man, I can remember, when Josh, I didn't learn tapping until he was 3. And the first 3 years, getting up for some of that nighttime fear stuff without tapping was so much more challenging to work with. The other thing is, in EFT, I was using EFT back then, and in EFT you have to use all these, these setup statements and particular words, whereas with kids you don't usually need the words. Just tapping on the points, and sometimes talking about what they're feeling, or and sometimes they don't know what they're feeling. So sometimes you can just guess at what they might be upset about, but just the process of tapping on the points is very calming, very relaxing, and yeah, I can't praise it enough. I could, we might come back to this because I can give a number of other examples. I've also said that it's as a parent, you do a lot of tapping on yourself about your kids, because some of their problems are tied up in your problems. So I learned the hard way, actually, that I needed to do the tapping on myself to be able to free myself up to manage them. And, I was speaking about Olivia. When she was born, she was a screamer, and she would scream for hours. All kids do this, but she would do it routinely, and she could break bricks with her screaming. Anybody who heard it was like, wow, what a set of lungs she has. But when you're the parent, it just gets you. And one day I was changing her, and I was just shaking, this is when she was a baby. And because it's like she's dying. And I realized how tense and upset I was. So I actually just started tapping on these points. And within about a minute, I calmed down. And I suddenly had the realization, she just cries. She's not dying. She's just crying. And ever since that time, you know, her crying didn't have the same effect. Now, because she didn't just cry because she was wet, or because she was hungry, or because she, you know, had to burp or whatever. Sometimes she just cried because she was having a new experience. And but when you're the parent, it's like, oh my God, I've got to fix this. My child is dying, you know. And yeah, highly stressful. So tapping was a real boon for that. And it was just wonderful to be able to use it on us. And my wife would say the same things. You know, she's been using tapping for years, and we used it on them. We did it on the points for them when they were kids. And now they all know it for themselves. Callum, our son with Down syndrome, doesn't generally have the same issues. He's more in the moment than the other kids. But I've also had them do the tapping on him. You know, like one time we were at a friend's house, we're driving home in the car, and he got scared because they had said, watch out for our cat, you know, it might scratch you. So he got really scared about that. And on the way home in the car, he started to cry because he obviously, you know, had this thought in his mind. I couldn't do anything. So I said, Josh, would you just do the tapping on Callum? And 2 minutes later, he's laughing and no more problem. So yeah, it's been a really, really wonderful thing. All right, so do we have one more, Megan?
So there was a few questions around related to that. What about kids with autism or ADD or ADHD?
Okay, everybody comes in with the big heavy duty stuff. There are people using tapping with autism. This is a massively challenging area because you're talking about a high level of anxiety and a sensitivity. And so you have to be, you know, and it's a spectrum, of course. So, you know, some kids, you won't be able to touch them or in this way. But if you can actually get rapport with them and you can do this, then you can certainly help them to calm down that anxiety. And there are people who are getting great results. I haven't had the experience of working with kids with autism, so I can't talk personally from that experience. But if you go online and you Google it, you'll find a lot of people who are doing that work, and some of them have actually established some pretty good protocols for doing that. But it's not going to rewrite the book on autism. It's not going to rewrite the book on some really severe, you know, disorders and so on. It's not going to, you know, but it can help with the anxiety, and it can help people to have a normal life. You know, even in some of our more extreme mental disorders, such as schizophrenia. David Lake, my friend, has used tapping with a number of people with schizophrenia, and that's not going to take away schizophrenia, but it helps them to deal with their stress and anxiety, because they have stress and anxiety just like everybody else. And to help that to settle down can be a really, really good thing for anybody. All right, so shall we come back to the questions, Megan? I might go through the tapping and then I might get to the demo and stuff like that, because
yep. Good idea.
Time waits for no one. So let me just quickly come back to sharing again, and we'll march forward to number 23. Okay, so this is, we're not going to go to 23, are you? Come on. So this is EFT. Now, EFT has a basic recipe. And the basic recipe of EFT is you select a problem that you're going to focus on. In EFT, you have to come up with words for that problem to describe that problem. So let's say you have a fear of heights. Then your reminder phrase might be this fear of heights. And then you rate how intense that, how much that affects you from 0 to 10. Where 0 is nothing, 10 is as bad as it could be. Then you construct a setup statement. And the setup statement is, even though I have this problem, and usually instead of the word problem, you put in the words for the problem, I accept myself. It's some variation of a self-accepting statement combined with a problem statement. So even though I have this fear of heights, I accept myself. And then you tap, and when you're tapping, using EFT, you focus in on your problem using the reminder phrase, such as this height fear or this fear of heights, Each time you tap on the point, you focus in on, use your reminder phrase to focus in on the fear. And then you keep going through all of the points. Now, there was a long original version of EFT, which used some points on the upper body that I've been showing you, and also some points on the hand. Mostly now in EFT, they just use what was called the shortcut version, where they just tap on the upper body points. And, you know, there are 7 or 8 points depending on the different versions that you'll see around the place. And once you've tapped on those, each of those points, and, you know, generally you're tapping on each point 7 to 10 times, then you stop and you check in and you see what your intensity level is on the problem. Now, because problems can have lots of different parts, some problems will resolve quite quickly, and others you will have to keep doing that basic recipe and applying it to all of the different parts of the problem until you're done. Now, these are the points that are used. The points on the left-hand side are the upper body points, which are used in EFT, and most versions of EFT only use those upper body points now, and they combine it with what was originally called the karate chop point. I believe that's going to be changed to, in many cases, just to the side of the hand point instead of karate chop. So I apologize, I have an old diagram here. And it originally also involved those points on the fingers and hand. Now, we still use those in our tapping approach, but we've done away with a lot of the words of EFT and made that process more simple. But we find that actually these points on the fingers and hand can be quite useful. So in EFT now, they use this point on the top of the head. Then there's a point at the start of the eyebrow, side of the eye, under the nose, under the chin, under the collarbone point, and under the arm. And apart from the side of the hand, those are the only points that are used in most EFT protocols these days. Okay, so we developed our version of tapping by experimenting and testing what worked with EFT and varying and checking out whether you could do it with and without some of the elements. So the setup statements that are used in EFT, we started you know, discovering, plus we had seen Gary Craig not always using these statements. And so we started to question and say, well, do you really need to use them at all? And can you just simply do the tapping and focus on the problem instead of having to make these statements, which people get hung up on the statements and it causes them to worry about what they should be doing and how they're doing it. And a lot of them don't use it as much as they could. David Lake also found that, you know, when he was doing trauma work, that he would do a round of EFT on each part of the trauma that his clients had gone through. And, you know, in a session, he might be going through, let's say someone had a hold up. He might be working with them on all the different parts of what happened in that hold up and the reactions that they had to it and the feelings that they're having about it. And he would be tapping and going through a round of EFT on each of those parts and then checking in and seeing where they're at and then doing another round and so on. And as he got more efficient, he fit more rounds of EFT tapping into each session, and he noticed that the clients who had more rounds of tapping were getting better more quickly. So then he thought, well, why stop tapping? And so he started having them tap continually instead of doing tapping in rounds like they do in EFT. And we started to integrate that into our approach because it proved to be an excellent, excellent process. And we now do continual tapping with all of our clients. We no longer use the setup statements that they use in EFT. We don't have to construct words for the problem. We let our clients focus on the problem in their own way. And we also discovered this thing we call energy toning, which is that we discovered that if you simply tap on the points a lot without even focusing on problems, it tends to tune and tone your energy system and bring down your stress and bring up your life energy and your confidence, so that some of your problems can calm down and you start feeling more optimistic and less stressed and less anxious in your life generally. And we discovered this particularly at our retreat at Broome. We'd been working with people, you know, we had a small group of people who'd come from various parts of the world to this special retreat where we were all working on problems, and everybody was tapping on the points at the same time for like, you know, 3 days. And then we went down to the markets, and there's this guy here with the snake. And the lady, not the one who's touching the snake, that's our friend Lenny Lenore Watts. The lady in the background, if you can see the lady just behind her with the smile on her face, that lady, she said, I've had a phobia my whole life of snakes. I'm going to go up and get the snake and put it around my neck. And unfortunately, I don't have a photo of her with that snake, but she went up and got the snake around her neck, and she's like, oh my goodness. And we never focused on the snake phobia. We never had done anything in the sessions that anybody could connect with her problem, but her problem had gone away. And we put that down to the amount of tapping that had happened. So now we realize that, you know, just getting the tapping and just doing the tapping on the points can be beneficial, whether or not you focus on problems or not. So some quick basics, and then we'll do a demo. You can tap in any order. You can tap on either side of the body. Some people like to tap on both sides at once. It doesn't really matter. You can tap on the left side or you can tap on the right side. You can focus on whatever you're aware of when you're tapping, whether it's thoughts or feelings or body sensations. If you have an image or a memory, you can simply focus on that and you can tap. You can tap directly where you're focusing on problems, or you can just tap. We also combine tapping with mindfulness, where you just mindfully pay attention. Just notice what's happening in your body, notice what's happening in your mind, accept what's there, allow it to be there, and just add the tapping to its presence and follow along with what happens next. We find the more tapping you do, the better the results that you get. And as I've mentioned, if you tap every day and you do enough of this, then we find that your general set point for anxiety and your stress tends to reduce, and your good confidence and life energy tends to increase. When you're tapping, you tap hard enough to feel it, but not hard enough to hurt. And in the demonstration, I will go through again the points, just so that you can go away and you'll know what those are. You can also, off our website, I'll give you that at the end and we'll send you a link, but it's EFTdownunder.com. Has a bunch of stuff on EFT, a bunch of stuff on our simple tapping approach, some stuff from other people, as well as some stuff on my new approach I've discovered called intention tapping. Some key differences between our approach and EFT. I've already mentioned some of these. We don't routinely use setup statements or reminder statements. Instead, we have people focus on their problem in their own way. We use continual tapping, and we also use the fingertip points, the points on the hand, and we also teach people to tap on those points, not just using the other hand, but also using the thumb of the same hand. And this fingertip tapping is fantastic because it's portable, and you can take it out into public in a situation where your stress comes up, because nobody's going to go out into public and tap on these points on their face. But what they can do is that they can use their thumb to gently tap on the points on the finger, on the side of the fingers and the side of the thumb, and they can be reducing their stress and reducing the cortisol and increasing their endorphins and all the stuff that we know is happening with tapping at that same time. All right, so what we might do now is we might now get a couple more questions, and then Megan, if we can, I don't know if you've already got a volunteer or not, but I might answer a question or two, and then we might do a demo. Just in regard to the demo, tapping works really well, in my experience, on all negative emotions. It works better for anxiety-based conditions than for more severe mood disorders. So if you're dealing with severe depression, then tapping is probably not going to be the only approach that you use in most cases, depending on what type of depression that is. You know, it can be a very severe depression, but it may be situational or anxiety-based. In that case, tapping could be great. But you know, some of those conditions, it's going to be harder to get results with tapping on its own. I also want to say it can be great for dealing with trauma. It's spectacular for treating trauma. It's really great for sadness, and it's really great for grief. But that's not something that we really have time to deal with in this session. So I'm asking the volunteers to bring, you know, some more common garden variety human problems like anxiety, stress, worry, irritation, anger, annoyance, or the stuff that upsets you. It could be a fear or a phobia. That's fine, but this is not really the best forum or the right forum for us to deal with a severe trauma or a severe grief reaction or really strong sadness, because we're not face to face. We can't support you properly in that way. Plus, anybody who comes online to volunteer, I need to know that you have somebody to support you if, for example, we get knocked offline or whatever happens. Because I just want to show you how to use the technique. It's possible that if you've got some strong parts of the problem behind that you might need support. So I need to know that you have that. All right. So Megan, shall we have? Do you have another question or two for me, and then we'll maybe answer that, and then we'll get our volunteer.
Sorry, you're just cutting it. How everyone else's connection is. I think if anyone would like to volunteer,
Okay, yeah, I think it's your connection, Megan, because can people just type in, are you having trouble hearing me, or are you having trouble hearing Megan?
Oh dear, I don't know what.
Okay, man, there's a lot of people online.
No, I'm back. So if anyone would like to volunteer, can you raise your hand? Where's that raising your hand? Or, yep, we got 4 people.
Okay, all right. So maybe just take one.
I came up to 9. Okay.
All right. Wow. Well, we can't do everybody, so we can. We might get a chance to do with a couple, because it's sometimes good to show how it works differently on different problems and for different people. Sometimes if you see a tapping demonstration and you only see it done on one thing, you think it only works for that one thing.
Yeah. So Steve, you've done this before. Do you actually get them to show their video and talk? Obviously,
yeah, I need to feed them.
Feedback.
If you can actually make them a panelists, and they need their video and their microphone to be working.
Okay. Do you want a question while I set that up?
Yeah, sure.
So common questions are: can tapping be used on physical pain, and can it be used with addictions like smoking or?
Okay, so yes, tapping can be excellent for pain relief. I just want to say, if you're using it on pain or using it with a client on pain, you should always make sure that they have a medical diagnosis and you know what you're dealing with. And the reason why I say that is David Lake, in the early days when we first learned tapping, he used tapping with a lady who had a severe brain tumor. It was terminal, and she was having severe headaches, so severe that she was in hospital all the time. She actually wanted to die at home. And she was able, using the tapping, to get those headaches to go away completely. Now, what that suggests is that tapping could also mask a pain that you might need to have, because pain is a message that there's something wrong. However, most pain that we experience is also suffering. So, there are a lot of conditions where tapping has been found to be beneficial. In fact, there's a study, for example, on people with fibromyalgia pain, where they had a significant improvement. And this was just an online tapping program that people were doing. And they were able to get significant relief on their fibromyalgia pain using tapping. We did a study on motor vehicle trauma. And although we weren't measuring pain, those people who did the sessions, almost all of them had severe pain associated with the motor vehicle accident, the effects of the motor vehicle accident, and they were astounded to a single person that I saw. I remember that they had all actually had improvements in their pain. So yeah, tapping can be great for pain. Regarding addictions, yes. Peter Stapleton, who I mentioned, has done a lot of research on food cravings. So emotional eating and food cravings, there's a lot of research on that. If you're dealing with other addictions like smoking and so on, and smoking is the toughest of all the addictions for people to get over, then you need to really not just do it on the cravings, you also need to do it on the underlying emotional issues. And so this is where good therapy needs to be combined with tapping. Most people who are using tapping combine it with their own particular therapy, and it can integrate with all kinds of different therapies and counselling approaches. So, you know, there's people who combine it with CBT. I combine it, you know, we combine it with provocative therapy. We call that provocative energy techniques. There's lots and lots of stuff, you know, that you can do to combine this with. And so, you know, the thing about severe addictions as well is that you need to also have people find a positive replacement for their addiction. Now, the tapping can become this, because if you use your whatever it is, your poison for stress relief, and you just take that away, now you're stressed and you've got nothing to give you that relief. Whereas the tapping can actually can take that over, and it can also interrupt the pattern. So it can be used with addictions. Most of the people who are getting results are also good therapists, I'll say, because tapping is just a technique. And then the results that people get, even though it's a very active technique and a lot of people can get results, you know, this is why, unfortunately, there's people using it, you know, they've only done a weekend workshop and they, you know, they can get results with some great stuff. So then suddenly they're an expert. And the problem is that then they encounter some people who they can't get results with, because you need to be able to get rapport. You need to be able to actually help people to identify core issues. All the stuff that you've been learning in your counselling and therapy training is going to stand you in good stead for working on those issues. All right, so I see some people here, Megan. Who's my client?
Yes. We've got Jenny, we've got Michelle, we've got Miranda and Sophie.
Okay, so hello. So
yeah, if you could just show your video, and then we know who, so Steve can know who he's looking at.
Okay, so so we might actually, if it's all right, so we've got Michelle, we've got Sophie, we've got Miranda and Jenny. Is that's all? All the ladies who've up there.
I think once people found out they were going to be on video, they took their hands down.
Well, no, that's okay. Four is probably plenty given the time that we have, because we only have really time to do a quick demonstration and to get started on the problem. So what I'll do is I'll actually I'll just what I might do is actually show you some of the points first, and then I'll actually check in with you about what the problem is, and then we'll get you to start focusing on that problem and using the tapping. Because even if you only remember 2 or 3 of the points, that will be enough to get started with. And then once we've gone through and checked in with everybody, I'll run through the points again and have you tap on all the points, and then we'll check in with you again. Does that make sense? Okay, so the first point is the start of the eyebrow. And just take 2 fingers, and everybody who's watching along, you could do this too. So if you go in between your eyebrows and then towards one side, it could be this side or it could be that side, it doesn't really matter. And just tap hard enough to feel it, but not hard enough to hurt. And then follow the eyebrow around to the edge of the temple, the side of the eye, and just tap in there at the side of the eye. And you can tap 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, it doesn't really matter. And then go under your eye in the top of your cheek, and then under your nose in the midline, and then under your lip in the midline. And then the next point is just underneath the head of the collarbone. So if you just go to this U in the base of your throat, and there's a knobby bone on either side, just pick one of those knobby bones and just go just underneath it, tap right there, close into the center of the chest. And believe it or not, close enough is good enough. You do not have to be precise with this technique. And then the next point is under the arm and the side of the body. For ladies, it's about middle of the bra band on the side of the body. And for gents or anybody who's not wearing a bra, it should be, I would say, for someone who's flat-chested like myself, or relatively, it should be equivalent to the nipple on the side of the body, or about 6 to 8 centimeters under the armpit. Just tap in there at 90 degrees. It's kind of just there. And one guy says to me, I don't have a nipple on the side of my body. I said, well, just tap level with the one that you do have. Tap in there at 90 degrees and see how you go. And just take a deep breath. And these are just some of the upper body point. Now in EFT, they also use this one on the top of the head. You can tap that with all of your fingers, just on the top of the crown there. I always feel like you should be rubbing your tummy when you do this one. So I don't even teach this to my clients first up because it looks so weird. And then there's some points on the side of the hand, on the side of the thumb. So the first point is on the side of the thumb, level with the base of the thumbnail. So it's on the palm side, level with the base of the thumbnail. Just tap in there. And then on the side of the index finger, level with the nail. Okay, on the thumb side. And then on the side of the middle finger. And then we also tap on the side of the ring finger. And then we tap on the side of the little finger. And then we tap on the side of the hand in that meaty area. Okay, and just take a deep breath. Now, what we'll do is, I'm going to go through and I'm going to ask you what your problem is. And so I'll get you to unmute yourself. So Michelle, can you unmute yourself? Looks to me like you don't. Yeah?
Okay, now.
Okay, you're there.
I just did.
Right.
Hear me?
Yeah, just. So, what's the problem you want to try this out on?
So I've had a lot of stress in my life since Christmas, but the biggest one is I'm on a waiting list for cervical cancer, and
Cool.
so I'm having a lot of stress and anxiety around that.
I'm glad you chose a small issue for us. You know, sure, okay. Didn't I say something about this? But anyway, all right.
Just to be able to just cope each day while I'm waiting at the moment, because I lost a lot of weight and I'm kind of a little bit, worried.
Okay, so right now, when you think about that, how stressed do you feel? And this is just so the group has a comparison. From 0 is nothing to 10 is as bad as you could feel. How worried do you feel?
Probably about 9.8.
Okay, so I just want you to focus on that worry or whatever it is that's worrying you. And I want you to tap on the points. Now, tapping works on the negative. So believe it or not, instead of trying to think about the positive, I want you to tune into what's upsetting you, even if it makes you feel some of those feelings. Did you notice, by the way, when you did that, what happened? Just now?
That I took a deep breath.
Yeah, so this is, and this is what I want people to observe when they're watching people do this. Once they start tapping on these points, see that point there is actually quite good for you. Do you notice that?
Yes.
It's already creating an effect. And anybody who's watching should be able to see that. And what are you noticing? Is it still 9.8?
No, I feel maybe about 9.5.
That's still pretty stressed.
Well, it's still stressed, but I'm feeling a little bit happy, a little bit more relaxed about it. I don't know.
Instantly. So for 98% of people who do the tapping, within a few minutes, they're going to start feeling more relaxed. Okay, but it can do a lot more than just relax you. So I want you to just keep going. And even though you don't really know all the points, just tap on whichever ones you can remember and see if you can focus on all the things about that worry you. And then just keep tapping and we'll come back to you, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you. No
you.
worries. Okay, Sophie, can we unmute Sophie? All right.
Hello.
All right, Sophie, what did you want to actually try the tapping on?
Well, I have to fly from Brisbane to Melbourne next week.
Yes.
And I'm not actually afraid of flying per se, but I do have some claustrophobia
Right.
and emetophobia as well. So I usually medicate myself, so I'm sure not to be nauseous and I'm sure to stay calm. I do that with pills.
Good. So you have these things that you can use that can self-soothe and bring down the over-arousal, but they're not stopping the thing from being triggered.
Yeah.
So if we do a really, really good treatment with tapping on it, something like this, you shouldn't be triggered in the same way. And if you are, you shouldn't get the same level of activation. So that's the aim. But who knows if we have enough time to get there today? We'll just see. So right now, if you think about that flight, what happens to you?
There's a bit of a knot in my stomach.
Okay. So I want you to just focus on the knot. Actually, before we start tapping, give us a number, 0 to 10, for how severe that is or how intense.
Oh, it's an 8.
Okay, so I want you to put your attention on the knot. Since you're aware of the feeling in your body, put your attention on the feeling and just tap. And all I want you to do is don't try and make that feeling go away. I just want you to tap on these points. And as you tap, just notice what the feeling does. It might change to another feeling. It might get stronger. It might get weaker. It might, you might have a thought or something come up, or a memory or an image. Just notice, and then whatever comes up, just keep tapping. All right? And right now, actually, while you're doing that, what's happening with that feeling?
It decreased slightly.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So it's still there. Is it
Yeah.
the same feeling, just less?
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's doing that, just keep going. And all I want you to do is to just keep focusing on just noticing what's there and noticing what the feeling is doing, and just keep on tapping on whatever points you can remember. Even if you miss some, it doesn't really matter. Okay? All right, Miranda, hello.
Hi.
Okay, what did you want to focus on?
In the last probably 3 years or so, I've developed major trust issues.
Okay, so
Some
I
stuff
I heard that
early in my
sigh.
life.
I heard that sigh, so it's really kind of draining your energy, or weighing you down, or something.
Yeah,
Yeah?
huge stress. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So give us a number. Guess it's going to be quite high, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So all I want you to do is to just start tapping. And just don't try and focus on anything. Just notice whatever you notice. And so you might have a thought, or you might have a feeling, or you might have a body sensation.
My stomach just turned.
Okay. All right. So believe it or not, this is good. Movement is life. And so when things get stuck is when we have a problem. It's when they move that things can get better. The only problem is that some of these feelings, when they move, can stress us out a little bit. Okay.
I've just gotten really hot in the face.
Okay. So just notice the heat and just allow it to be whatever it does. It might get hotter, or it might cool down, or it might shift, because we went straight from one feeling to a different feeling, right? And just notice what's happening with that hot feeling.
It's getting less.
Okay. And what about the stomach feeling? Is that still there?
No, that's gone. It was just sort of like a once.
Wow, isn't that interesting? See how quick your system goes through things, you know? So some people just, wow, straight from one thing to another, you know? But sometimes there's one aspect that needs to spend a bit of time. So is it still really hot?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm almost back to normal with my temperature.
Okay, good. All right. So just try tapping on the side of the thumb.
So the thumb.
Yep. And the side of the index finger, and the side of the middle finger, and the ring finger, and the little finger, and the bottom of the hand. And what's that? What was that thought you just had just then?
I just was just thinking. I just feel like I haven't even thought it.
You feel like you haven't even thought about the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually quite common. And some people will say, oh, now it's just a distraction. But there's actually been studies which have used other distraction. There have been studies using points which are not the same points, and they haven't actually produced the same results as you get with doing the tapping. So it's not a distraction. But what I want you to do is I want you to see if you can get your problem back. I know that's...
While I'm tapping?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just keep tapping and see if you can actually focus in on the worst part of that problem, because there's probably more than one part of it that upsets you.
I'm feeling it again.
Right. See, so this is what happens when people do the tapping. They're like, oh, I'm better. Well, no, you're only better on one part of the problem because that was the one part that you focused on a minute ago.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get better on the whole problem, you've actually got to change how you feel about all different aspects of it.
And there's a hot face again.
Yeah, okay. So some people will notice that there's certain parts that get activated, and these are the kind of the pathway for them to notice the problem or their problem, how it expresses in their body or their mind. And just notice that and just keep tapping.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. So now is a different thought, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're actually maybe looking back on what happened or going back over something.
I'm not sure exactly, but I just sort of like there's different parts of the trust issues that has got me to the trust issue.
Yep. Sure.
And I didn't really think of anything in particular. It was just dropping back into that emotion.
Yep. And are you there now?
I'm not, no. See, now I'm feeling like I could just sit down and cry.
Okay. So this is just another part of the problem that's coming up. And so, you know, you're accessing a deeper emotion behind the other stuff. So just allow that feeling to do what it does. And don't try and make it go away. This is what we do is we have feelings that are hard and we say no to them, and therefore they never get to actually process. I believe that feelings are meant to move us and they're meant to move through us. And this is how we move through things in life. But if we don't move through them, then we're stuck in them. And that's the problem. So just keep tapping and notice whatever the sadness is. Do you have a feeling in your body?
I'm getting hot in the face again.
Yeah.
It seems to be when I come to this area.
Okay. So sometimes what you find, and this is what when we do tapping with people, sometimes there are certain points which seem to bring the problem out more strongly.
Yeah.
And if you notice that, then you can go to those points, you can bring a part of it out, but then go to the other points and calm it down. And you can do this in a kind of graded way so you don't overwhelm yourself. Because,
yes, as soon as I moved off that section, it's gone.
Sure, okay. Well, eventually what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to go to those points and you won't get the intensity that you had before in terms of the heat.
Yeah.
And that will be when it's really starting to really move and improve. That's it. Keep breathing, you might live. Because what you don't realize when you're focused on the face feeling is that your breathing is also altered. And these are all parts of the problem that sometimes happen all at once. And so when you do the tapping, you move through different parts. And as the tapping moves through the body and we believe it restores the flow and you know, gets things moving, then you're able to breathe and think differently. So what are you thinking or feeling at this moment?
Not much. No, I'm not really feeling much at all in the way of.
I love that beautiful questioning look on your face when you said that.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think what I would be feeling, and I don't know.
Yeah. So just feel whatever you're feeling. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, because people are like, you know, I should be upset right now, but I'm not. Or, you know, I should be feeling whatever I was feeling a minute ago. But actually you've moved out of that feeling, maybe for a moment, maybe for a long time, maybe sometimes when you've moved out of it forever, because you don't have to have that same connection that you have. If you have a stuck feeling, you have a stuck perspective and you're stuck in a moment in time, you know?
So if, like, when I experience that feeling of my trust issues, is that when you do the tapping?
Well, yeah, you can do it for
When you
first aid like that, but you
Yeah.
can also do it when you're not feeling it, and you
Yeah.
can focus on all the problems. And
Yeah.
you can, when we did our phobia research, we didn't have to take people to the mouse or the spider. We could have them just thinking about that, and then when they went there, they didn't get activated in the same way.
Sure.
And that's what you really want, isn't it? You don't want to have
Yeah.
you don't want to have to be already upset and then calm yourself down. You want to actually not get the same reaction coming up that you were getting stirred up before.
Yeah.
All right, so we're just going to pause here, and then we've got Jenny. So hello, Jenny. So you please keep tapping. So thank you, everybody who's doing that. Keep tapping on whatever we agreed to focus on and whatever you notice. And if you notice different parts and problems, just tap and focus on those. Okay, Jenny,
Hi.
last but not least.
Yes.
What
Okay.
would-
Yeah. So I'd just like to talk about a daughter of mine. A little bit of a connection to the first lady that spoke. My daughter had a serious adverse reaction to the HPV vaccine in 2014. So we've dealt with a lot of chronic illness in the last 5 years. So while we've come through the other end and she's doing much better, I think there's a lot of things that, I need to.
Oh, God, yeah. Man,
Yeah.
that's exhausting.
Oh, it's been more than exhausting, but I'm proud to say that I think through my determination and hard work of recovering her
Yes.
at 80%, I think we're getting there, where there's light at the end of the tunnel now.
Some of that is kind of, pushing through and gutting it out and having to face all the darkness and demons and the inanities and, terrible treatment and all kinds of different aspects that you can get along the way with those kind of things. And sometimes when you get at the end is when all the reactions kind of catch up with you.
Yes,
So,
yes. Because I look
yeah.
back now and I reflect and I think we made it. Even though at the time it was difficult, extremely hard, we've got through it. And sadly, some children have reactions to these type of vaccines.
Yeah, it's fantastic actually. But
Yeah.
it would be so much better if you didn't have to still be feeling some of that, the feeling of that.
Well, yes, that's the thing that I need to probably learn as a mother to overcome.
Yeah.
I think 5 years of it consuming my life, I think, I've still got to work on healing.
Okay, so let's try some tapping on that. I just want you to, tell me how much that 5 years, if you think about the 5 years, how much that stirs you up from 0 to 10 right now, where 10 is as bad as it could be and 0 is nothing.
Probably 8.
Okay, so you just focus on whatever you want to about that and just start tapping.
Anywhere?
Yeah, well, at this point, follow me if you like. So this point on the eye, start of the eyebrow.
Yep.
Yep. And then the side of the eye. And then under your eye. And then under the nose. Yeah, so it's taken a bit of a toll.
Oh, more than a toll.
Yeah,
But I feel good that I'm coming out of it and feeling a lot better.
yeah. Okay, good. You've come out of the darkness into a little bit of light.
Yeah, a lot of light now.
But I don't know, when I got caught in a rip once, once I got rescued and brought back to the land, I couldn't move. I was collapsed.
Yeah.
So anyway, this just that's me. You focus on you. Just tap and notice whatever you notice.
I think determination more than anything of healing.
Okay, and that's what got you through.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Determined that it's going to get better, and even though through 5 years being so long, I was still determined that this was going to get better.
Yeah. Okay, so when you focus on the 5 years, and the determination is all the good stuff, right? Strangely enough, I want you to focus on the bad stuff. Now, you don't want to do that because you've just had 5 years of bad stuff, but it's just whatever's still hanging around or whatever's, you know, something that you think you still need to get over.
Yeah, I think just knowing that she lost all her teenage years.
Okay. So when you think about that, what happens?
I think just quite upset.
Okay. So just notice how that feels and just tap. Because of course, when you focus in on that, you get taken into the dark side of the problem, and those thoughts can come up at various times. So what we want to do is we want to focus in on them so that when they do come up, they don't have that same effect on you. And sometimes, you know, when you do focus in on something which is painful, you access some of the painful feelings. And the tapping, hopefully, if it works, will help those feelings to settle down. So just notice what you're thinking and what you're feeling as you keep on tapping.
I just think the future is going to be better.
Isn't that interesting? See, I didn't actually tell you to focus on the future. I told you to focus on the negative. But the minute you actually were doing that, this is what happens with the tapping. It actually, when you start focusing on something which is negative and which gives you a bad feeling, and things start to shift, without having to try and put the positive in, it comes up naturally and you start focusing on different possibilities.
I think because it's been so negative for such a long time, I can't think any more negative. I've got to think moving on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And moving forward and forgetting about what we've lost. And I guess the future. Yeah.
Okay. But if you have a normal human mind, some of that stuff will come up. And if it does, you can actually use this tapping on it and see what happens, because sometimes it's hard when the thoughts have got a grip on you to tell yourself to focus on the bright side.
Yeah, I find that it often flashes through my mind all the time. I think just with different milestones, like her friendship group, they've moved, like they're doing different things in a really positive way, and I feel like I've lost a bit of her life. Yeah.
Okay. So again, focus in on that. Notice how it affects you, and just keep tapping. So every time you notice that there's a dark thought or a dark memory or a dark feeling or a negative, whatever you call a negative feeling, just notice it and just apply the tapping and just see what comes next. And if it's okay, we'll just pause, and I'm just going to quickly check in with everyone else. And I notice our time is marching on. I don't know, Megan, do we have to finish on the dot?
Steve, we were just looking at that. I think we've got an extra half an hour.
Okay, so we might go for another. We probably won't use up the whole half hour, but we might go for. We're definitely going to go over. So for those of you who can stay around, that would be great. If you have to go, obviously, you do what you have to do if you have a commitment. But I would like to be able to check in with everybody. We've only just got started on some of this stuff. So Miranda, did you want to say something? Yep.
Sorry, the host and I are playing mute.
I saw your hand
Sorry,
up.
that's my fault. Sorry, Miranda.
That's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly check in because I'll have to go and put my to bed.
Yep.
As you're talking with Jenny, I tried to drop back into that feeling, and it was nowhere near. I didn't get the emotional response like I did to start with.
Exactly.
Like it's really, I get more of a response from the right side of my body when I'm tapping.
Yep.
More body sensations and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you're very kinesthetically aware. Not everybody's as aware of what's going on in their body as you are, but since you can notice that, then you can go with whatever's happening and you can adapt based on that. Sometimes if you notice, you're tapping on a certain point and you're starting to relax, you can just keep on tapping on that point. and see where it goes. And I'll be very surprised just with the simple stuff that you have now. Even if you only remember half of these points and you keep on using it on that, I'll be very surprised if you don't notice that it makes a big difference. And I'd love to get some feedback from you if you try it out, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks heaps, Steve.
No worries. Michelle, can we check with you? Are you still tapping? I can't see if you're still tapping.
No, sorry, I was so fascinated with Miranda's story.
What's that?
I was so fascinated with Miranda's story.
Yeah. So if it's okay, can you just check in on your issue and just see where that is at the moment?
So right now I feel really calm and I feel more acceptance of whatever's going to be, you know, and I did have a big cry like Miranda. Yep. And I don't know, I just felt like all these emotions were coming to the top of me, but now I feel more relaxed and I probably feel like I'm more like a 5 now.
Fantastic. Okay. So if you can get a small improvement, then there's a good chance that you can get a complete improvement. And so, you know, some people are like, I'm a 5, I'm happy with that. You know, this is really good. But actually you can, if you continue with the process, you can find that, you know, that you can get even better than that. And sometimes it's hard to believe that that's even possible, but I've seen it happen over and over and over and over again. So sometimes that's just a matter of persisting through all the different parts of the problem. You know, there's a lot that we don't have time to talk about today, but I can say the number one factor in most cases when people don't get completely over a problem is just simply they haven't used it enough and they haven't done enough of this tapping on all the different parts of the problem.
Yeah.
Also, as you noticed, you had some strong feelings and you were able to bear with those while they moved through you. Yes. And so this is really what's important is, you know, when you access those feelings, if you keep going with the tapping, then it gets easier.
Yes.
So, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Sophie, how about you? Where are you at?
The feeling in my stomach, the knot in my stomach is not as acute. It's more of a wiggly feeling in my legs now. But it definitely decreased. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So if it's decreased, then that's good. But you know what? It can decrease further. And if you now have a different feeling, now you can start with that. And that will do whatever it does. It might get stronger, it might get weaker, it might get bigger, it might get wider, it might get more diffuse. There's lots of different things that can happen. And sometimes you're focusing on a feeling and then a thought comes up. Just follow whatever happens and keep on doing the tapping. And I want to show you another thing that you can take away. And that is that you can use the thumb of the same hand. Just let the thumb tap. So some people do like this, like let the thumb just tap down on the side of each of these fingers. So I'm doing it on the index finger and then on the ring finger and then on the, the middle finger, then the ring finger, and then on the little finger. And, you know, once you've gone down the ladder, then you can go back up the ladder to the next one up and then the next one up. And you can do this anywhere. You can be doing this. I could be sitting here, you know, I could be tapping on these points and you wouldn't know. You could be in a situation where you have to give a presentation. You're tapping under the desk or under the table ahead of your presentation. You know, you could have, like my son, you know, he used to do it when he went to work with his mad Macca's boss 10 years ago. And he would be tapping with his hands inside his jacket whenever he had to deal with some of her little turns and stuff that she would have. Because anyway, he ended up moving out of that job because it was the wrong kind of person to be working with. But it really helped him to manage her by just doing this fingertip tapping whenever he was in her presence, whenever she got upset at things that, you know, that didn't even involve him in many cases. Also, you can, if you want to, you can tap on the side of that thumb point using just wrapping this one around or wrapping that one around. So you can do this as you go about your business. I've taught people to do it as they, you know, I would do it when I walk the dog, you know, just walking along, just gently tapping on the points, and nobody would really notice much about it. You can also just touch or rub the points instead of tapping. So if you think tapping is a little bit obtrusive. People naturally just rub and touch these points like this, and they generally tend to, just hold these kind of poses. So you can do that as another way of using the techniques very subtly, but it accumulates the benefit of tapping. Okay, so just quickly, if I could just check in with Jenny a second time before we pause our demo. How are you at the moment?
Yeah, no, I think by tapping it's a bit of a distraction to how you're feeling.
Well, it can be a distraction, but really it works best if you don't distract yourself from the problem, if you try and stay focused on the problem. So
I don't know how to describe it. As I was tapping and thinking and revisiting past, I don't know, it's just, I can't actually describe it.
Yeah.
But it makes you feel a little bit, I don't know, different. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's a beautiful description. It is sometimes, some things you can't put into words, but yeah, what I was really saying was it's not a distraction in the sense of, like if you try to distract yourself as a way of solving your problem, it won't solve your problem. The problem will still be the same. But when you do the tapping, you shift to other things, you shift to other thoughts, to other feelings, and to other memories naturally, and the problem doesn't have the same effect generally.
Yes, I think you're spot on there.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And would everybody please just say thank you to all our volunteers. It was really wonderful for you to be able to come on and to be able to do that, and just to show people some of the basics of tapping. It really is a simple process the way we do it. This is the simple energy techniques. And so, 95% of it is simply tapping on the points. And you can tap on the points like we did here and focus on the problem, however you're feeling or however you're thinking, and then just notice how it shifts your thoughts and feelings. Or you can just tap on the points, and the research shows that just a few minutes of tapping will reduce the cortisol, which is the stress chemicals. It will increase the endorphins and the positive chemicals in the system, and it changes the brainwave patterns. And as you can see on the brain scans, it changes the areas of the brain that are being activated. So that really changes. Wow, it's really lovely to see this chat stuff just really flying through. Thank you for all the stuff that you're writing, people, and giving that feedback. I hope that feedback is going to be passed on to the volunteers later, and I hope that those of you who volunteer can read all the stuff, because when you do volunteer, we get a benefit from that. And with tapping, there's a thing called borrowing benefits, where when someone works on a problem using tapping and you tap on yourself while you're observing that, you can get benefits on your own problems as well. So anybody who is doing that, I'm sure that's been the case for you. So thanks very much for that, and thanks for our volunteers. I might just, if it's okay, Megan, do you have maybe one or two of key questions that I can try and answer? And then we'll aim to be finished maybe at 6:45. So we've got like 7 or 8 minutes. Would that be okay?
Yep, that's fine. Some people are asking where can they do further training to be more qualified?
Yep. Okay. So I can give you that. Let me just share my screen again just quickly, and again we'll send this out. I'll just go to the slide. Come on. No, it wants me to do this first. Hang on, here we go. So number one, for more information, so there's our website, which is EFTdownunder.com, because EFT is what we started with, and then we've added all of our other techniques on there. There's stuff on EFT, there's stuff on SET, there's stuff on our PET, which is an advanced approach, and there's stuff on this new intention tapping, which I really haven't had a chance to get to. Man, an hour and a half goes so quickly. Intention tapping is a new approach that I've discovered, and some of the latest stuff you'll find on our blog, and I also have some webinars that I've done demonstrating that particular approach. And I do have some workshops coming up, as Megan mentioned. I have a workshop coming up in Sydney in June. I'm also going up to Darwin. The workshop in Darwin is only for for people who are already trained in counselling or therapy or are psychologists. So you need to have enough training to do the program in Darwin. The program in Sydney is open for learning the technique for self-help as well as for practitioners. Megan, we've got a little bit of feedback coming through. I'm not sure whether some people need to be muted or not. But anyway, any of the programs that we are running will be on EFTdownunder.com. The other thing is, if you subscribe to our newsletter, we also announce other things that are happening in the world of EFT and tapping generally. So when there's some more research that comes out, when there's something of ours that's coming up, we'll put that there. We put out free articles that we write and what other people write. And on the website, there is a free special report on simple energy techniques. So you look up simple energy techniques on the website, and you can also see there's free videos on how to do the technique. There are diagrams of the points. There is a special report going through how to use it for self-help and how to use it in counselling and therapy, and a whole bunch. There's hundreds of pages of articles and so on there. Then here's some of the other key places. ACEP is the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. They are energypsych.org, and they're US-based, but there are members all over the world. There is EFT International, EFTinternational.org, and then EFT Universe, EFTuniverse.com. And each of those sites has lots of information about the research as well as training, and there are various, the ACEP and EFT International and EFT Universe have all of their own training programs on EFT. We've now moved to doing training on simple energy techniques as well as on the intention tapping. While we're here, I'm going to mention, Megan talked about the fact that I'm coming to Sydney, and we do actually have a special that we put on for people from ACAP. So if you're an ACAP student, staff or alumni, instead of the regular fee for the workshop of $3.95 up to $5.95, depending on when you register, you can come for $2.95. There's a special link that we'll also send out after the webinar that you can get, or you can write to me and I'll give you that link and give you that special price. Or two people can come for the price of one early bird person for $3.95. So all of our programs, including that one, are on EFTdownunder.com/training. And on the screen right now, you can see the specific one for the Sydney workshop, EFTdownunder.com/intention-tapping-Sydney /. But again, if you just go to the training page at EFTdownunder.com, you can access all those programs on there. All right, so those are some places that you can go and where you can get stuff. There's a lot of free stuff available. I also have a book, and David Lake and I wrote a book called Enjoy Emotional Freedom, which has a lot of information about SET and EFT. We're currently having a dispute with the publisher about that, and we're hoping to get the rights back. And I also wrote a book called 100% Yes, and you can get that book from Amazon or various Amazon-related sites, as well as from our website and so on. I also want to put a plug for Peter Stapleton just has a book out recently called The Science Behind Tapping. So this is Peter Stapleton, The Science Behind Tapping. And again, we'll send that out with the information after the program. So you can get a hold of her book and you can find the scientific basis of this stuff and so on. All right. One more question or what, Megan?
That kind of sounds like a good place to leave it, really.
Yeah.
Does it feel good to leave it there?
Feels fine for me.
Thank you so much. I've just been seeing the feedback. Everyone's has really enjoyed the webinar, enjoyed the information that you've shared. They can definitely see how they can use it in practice or in their personal lives. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And for everybody who's been involved in setting this up, and for everyone who came live, especially anyone who's watching the replay because you had another commitment, just give it a go. It's a simple technique. It's very hard to do it wrong. The only time I ever saw someone do something bad with it was a guy that hit himself so hard that he gave himself a headache. And I just said, just tap a little bit more gently, in future. And so there's not been any evidence of really adverse effects. The challenge is if you try and use it for yourself on severe trauma, you're probably better off actually working with someone who's a qualified therapist on your own issues. I've done that on my own issues and had a lot of help from other people, so I recommend it. And on our website, you can find links to practitioners throughout Australia and worldwide. And so, yeah, thank you very much, and see you around. Hope to see you in Sydney or somewhere else, maybe Perth in a future workshop, Darwin, Melbourne, Brisbane, wherever.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone else for joining us, and we'll see everyone again soon.
Okay. Ciao for now.
Ciao.